Today is an exciting day for a lot of different reasons, but one of those reasons is the panel that is sitting up here behind me now. When we had the first symposium in 2019, it was probably the most talked about panel and the most anticipated panel of the whole day. And I think you're in for a surprise again today. Before I turn it over to Russ and the panelists, I do want to mention the pictures, the portraits that you see in the back of the room, and some of them were in the gallery. How many of you have noticed those pictures? If you haven't, please take a look at those. Those were taken in 2015 by Nick Vidros, who was one of our sponsors and donors and volunteers and friends of Reaching Out From Within. He did this entire portrait called Faces of Change that went into the prisons and photographed some of the members of Reaching Out From Within at Lansing Correctional Facility, at Topeka Correctional Facility, and gifted to Reaching Out From Within these wonderful portraits that show the faces of many of our members. The good thing about that is that some of the people that you'll see in those pictures are either sitting up here or are walking around the room today. Not all of them are out yet, but we're getting there. So want you to please take a look at those fantastic pictures called The Faces of Change, and let us know if you have a place that you'd like to show those, and we'll get those out to be able to publish those around. Russ, take it away.
I am Russ, and I'm going to be the moderator of this panel, and we're going to be talking about prevention. So how to keep people out of prison in the first place. And the first panel touched on adverse child experiences. We're going to talk more about that in this panel. We're going to talk about how that can correlate to subsequent mental health and criminal issues. Then we're going to talk about schools and how schools have a role of keeping our children safe and keeping them on the right path. And if that doesn't work and some kids come off that path and get on the wrong path, then we're going to talk a little bit about juvenile justice and what juvenile justice can do to intervene effectively. And we're going to talk about using incarcerated people as a resource from the perspective of being able to share their lessons learned with the youth. And finally, we're going to give two excellent examples of men who were incarcerated and have, subsequent to their incarceration, become preventers of crime rather than committers of crime. So that's what we're going to be about here. And I'm aware of the fact that we're the panel before lunch. And this is Fiorella's, and Fiorella's stands for great food. And so we're going to have a really wonderful lunch, and we will not delay that. 40 years ago, Sue Ellen Freed, right there, co-founded with Greg Musselman the Reaching Out From Within program. Sue Ellen Freed was the president of the National Committee for Child Abuse Prevention. Greg Musselman was a member of the Lifers Club at the Kansas State Penitentiary. How did those two come together? Well, it was around an article that was written by the Lifers Club and got published, and Sue Ellen read it. And that article was described in the preface of our Blue Book. The Blue Book for Reaching Out From Within is the curriculum that Greg showed us earlier. And in the preface, he describes what that article was about, and I'll just read that sentence to you. A survey of B Cell House was the focus of the article. 200 inmates lived there, and 90% participated in the survey. 80% openly talked about being abused as a child. And the end of that article has two really stark sentences. If you brutalize your child, don't be surprised if he grows up to become a killer. If you allow your neighbor to brutalize his children, don't wail and gnash your teeth when those children grow up to kill yours. So we're going to be talking a little bit about child abuse at the beginning of this, and so it's very appropriate that we're going to have our first presenter on the panel be Vicki Roper. Vicki is the director of Prevent Child Abuse for Kansas Children's Service League, where she has worked for 18 years. Vicki.
Thanks, Russ. Well, I am in this field largely as a result of Sue Ellen Freed. So Sue Ellen and I go way back. She started the very first Prevent Child Abuse America state chapter in Kansas. So she's been a visionary, starting new programs from the start, and that was in 1976. And then this all followed. So I am a beneficiary of her work and her laying the foundation for child abuse prevention in this state. In 1993, her Committee to Prevent Child Abuse and Neglect merged with my agency, the Kansas Children's Service League. And 10 years later, I became the Prevent Child Abuse Kansas State Director. And it really largely is based on a lot of the foundation of things that she put into motion 40 plus years ago in my field, like reaching out from within, is so based on her role as a visionary from 40 years ago as well. So I am a part of a Centers for Disease Control grant around Essentials for Childhood, where Kansas is one of 7 states in the country that's looking at adverse childhood experiences. And we know that the more adverse childhood experiences someone has birth to 18, the more long-term health, mental health, education, employment problems they're going to have, but also the research is there by the CDC, who are the top researchers in the world, that it can be a predictor for future violence, for incarceration, for recidivism after people get out. But there's good news around all of this. There's work that can be done here. And kind of what has happened is Sue Ellen invited me to get on the speaker circuit and with Reaching Out from Within programs and start presenting about adverse childhood experiences. And adverse childhood experiences are things like child abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, domestic violence, the observance of domestic violence, substance abuse in the home, mental health issues in the home, even postpartum depression, being separated from your caregivers for extended periods of time, even the military or child welfare or divorce. I mean, it can be a lot of things. Incarceration is one of those things, when you're separated from your child for an extended period of time. And so what I did was start presenting, and we brought some folks with me who presented their story with me. And we had the folks at Reaching Out from Within take the ACE questionnaire and look at those 10 areas. And there's lots of questionnaires now, so we started with the very simplified version where there were 10, and you had a score of 0 to 10. And they turned in their questionnaires anonymously, and I had somebody there that went through those and compiled them, and what we found was everybody there scored an 8, a 9, or a 10, everybody. And it was an aha moment for that room. And the different members of Reaching Out from Within stood up and asked a lot of questions. And one of the things that we had just learned at that time was also that having a high A score above 6 could knock 20 years off someone's life. And they were like, is this a death sentence for me? I'm at an 8, or I'm at a 10, or I'm at a 9. Is there anything that can change the impact? Is there anything that can change my trajectory because I have had so many adverse childhood experiences? And I said, yes, it's resilience. It's resilience. and we got to the next set of slides, which were the resilient slides. And what we learned is we just had aha moment after aha moment after aha moment, because the program of reaching out from within that had been created checked all those boxes. All those boxes. So the three big areas, the first one was really self-regulation. And there's so much to be said about self-regulation, about mindfulness and exercise and movement and play. But a big one is community and developing community. And I've been in the prevention field for 42 years, 43 years now, I guess. And in the beginning, and a lot of this is coming out of corrections. Corrections really, it has done a lot with all of this early. I'm talking about shared risk and protective factors in other fields and going back to the work that was done in corrections in the 90s. And it was change occurs when people are within community, developing skills together. And that appears to be a lot about what reaching out from within is about. The second area is attachment and belonging. And I'm going to read these. It's about rituals and traditions that get built together as a community. It's about therapeutic and health promotion. It's about mutual support, learning together, coming together. And then the third area is building capacity for well-being. And it's about shared leadership, focusing together with sort of a mutual vision of the future, and it's about developing a shared identity. It's also one of my favorite things is the opportunity to give back, the ability to really give back. So why is this important? Well, a lot of the latest research in this field, which you all know, is about recidivism, which we've been talking a lot about today, and building this resilience, which is what's happening through reaching out from within, is what is going to cause that reduction in recidivism, and that will save lives. So my hat's off to the corrections community for getting a handle on this so quickly, so early, for Sue Ellen and the foundation she laid to just be used to be able to create all of this. The Blue Book, I think that a lot of the ACEs information very quickly was put into the Blue Book, and you all are doing visionary work.
Thank you, Vicki. There's been a lot written about the school to prison pipeline. The ACLU describes it this way. It's the disturbing national trend wherein children are funneled out of public schools and into the juvenile and criminal justice system. Many of these children have learning disabilities or histories of poverty, abuse, or neglect, and would benefit from additional educational and counseling services. Instead, they are isolated, punished, and pushed out. So our next presenter comes from the school setting. His name is Andre Carnegie, but he's better known as Coach Dre. And Coach Dre is the student success coach of the Shawnee Mission School District, which is no small task because there are over 28,000 students there. He's got a background as a juvenile officer, and he is a colleague of mine on the board of directors for Reaching Out From Within. Coach Dre.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. So many good-looking, talented people in this room. Just a little bit about me. My name is Dre Carnegie. I work for the Shawnee Mission School District, and it's kind of crazy just in this room, and I'm thinking about, I grew up in Jamaica, moved to Canada, came to America on a track scholarship, ran in Nebraska, and, I was the oldest of 11 growing up, and if I'm being honest, I can't think of one person growing up that I thought loved and cared about me. I just didn't, so I'm in this room, and I'm looking at people who love people. So thank you for loving people where they're at. Thank you for loving people well. So yeah, my role at the district is essentially that. I am the life coach. I'm a mentor. I travel all day long, K through 12 with students. Prior to doing this, I was a probation officer, and in Johnson County, which was, honest, if I'm being honest, I was an elementary guy. I didn't like middle school kids. I didn't like high school kids. So, man, I'm really thankful that God gave me the opportunity to work with, middle school and high school kids who want supervision as I sharpen my skills in that area. But, yeah, so my job essentially with the district, I work very closely with principals, counselors, social workers, therapists, and really my job is simple, just to love kids where they're at, And when I left the court services, at the time the guys were coming out, this was pre-COVID, by the way, when we weren't wearing masks and all that stuff, but I knew I wanted the guys to come out to our school, so when I left the probation, I wanted to have that in my toolkit, so I would have the guys come out, they would visit with the students, share their stories. A lot of times it was building-wide, it was during assemblies. Right before COVID hit, we actually were hitting up some middle schools as well, and then going to middle schools and high school to visit and share. And, kids are funny, They're funny, man. And there's something about being transparent with a kid, really just being transparent and vulnerable and real. It's like when a kid sees you out in public, they're like, whoa, you exist outside my building, So, yeah, it's been really cool to have the guys come out and just be authentic and real and share their stories. And my job, I do work with a lot of high-risk kids, but I work with all kids. All kids need to be loved. All kids need that, But for those kids who are at risk or high risk, man, just you can see their wheels turning as the guys share their stories. I'm going to be honest with you. We're all one bad mistake away from change our lives. We are all one phone call from being on our knees, So I think everybody deserves love and dignity. I don't care what you've done. You deserve love and dignity. So, yeah, that's kind of my role. The kids, the guys come out and share their stories. I travel to about 10 schools per day. And when I commit to a kid, it's through graduation. So my youngest kid right now, my caseload is a pre-K kid, and my oldest kid is a senior in high school. So I travel with the kids as they go throughout their schooling. And we just have real conversations. We have real conversations about life and choices, courageous conversations that, sometimes these kids don't have that person in their life. And if they do, sometimes if it's mom and dad, it can be difficult to have those conversations. So honestly, I'm super grateful for my role, super grateful to be here today, and just super grateful for the guys and this room and this space and this opportunity to talk and share and celebrate. I love what Daniel said earlier in the panel before. Some of the stuff can kind of be somber, but we ought to be happy. I think it's one thing that COVID taught us, that we need to cherish every moment. We need to make the most of every moment. And that's what I try to do every day with students, families, and the community.
Shawnee Mission School District is lucky. Next to Coach Dre is Greg Bakke. And Greg Bakke is sometimes known as the boss. And Greg was released from prison in June last year, so he's had less than a year out of prison. He's very successfully serving his parole. And Greg spent a number of days down at the Shawnee Mission School District speaking with the kids that Coach Dre brought together. And so we're going to ask Greg to talk about that experience. Tell us a little bit about your background, and then talk about that experience and what it meant to you and how you think it impacted the kids.
Okay, well, thank you, Russ, and thank you, everybody, for, allowing me to be here. What a difference a year makes. Last June was just 8 months ago. And a lot of people here in this room were really instrumental in me being able to be up on the stage. So I'm just really thankful for that. So I'll just tell you a little bit about my road that got me to reaching out from within to begin with. When I got to prison, I was fortunate. I was able to get myself clean. I was off of drugs. I got a decent job, and I stayed out of trouble. And I continued that pattern for a number of years. But one thing I really never really addressed, other than that, is on the surface, everything was fine, but I never looked inside and never really exposed what demons I had inside me that drove me to use drugs in the first place, really. And I was aware of reaching out from within for a number of years, but I knew what that meant. I knew what joining Reaching Out from Within meant. It meant me talking about myself. It meant me talking about my crime, my guilt, everything that came along with it. So I finally took that step. I leaped out. And really, it's changed my life, and I'm really thankful for that. As part of Reaching Out from Within, there is the Speakers Bureau panel, which is the group that goes out and talks to schools like Coach Dre's and kids that were at-risk youth, evening reporting center, which you heard a little bit about from Callie here in a minute. And it was all about facing my fears at first, and public speaking, which you may or may not know, is still one of my huge fears. Like, I'm super nervous right now. This is just a part of my thing, I guess. But I faced it. I got out and I tried to participate. And really, when I got to my first event, it was at an evening reporting center. And it was the kids that had been in trouble, had violated their probation, and they were getting a second chance to, reset their lives. And when I got there, I saw how young they were, and I really saw what kind of need they had. And I think that kind of made me put my own self aside and let me, share my story. And I think by doing that, by letting everything go out there and just exposing my soul really to what I had done and how I felt about it and things that led me to it, they were able to maybe share back a little bit. And I think ultimately, by sharing my story, I exposed, like, a lot of my issues were with communication and always feeling like I was alone and not having anybody to talk to. And in hindsight, I had a lot of people I could have talked to, but I felt so isolated that I just never did. And I was trying to express to them a lot of times, like, they had people like Coach Dre or maybe at Callie's facilities that they could reach out and open up, and it was okay to be scared. And I had a lot of fears, fears about the future, fears about dealing with emotions with my dad or whatever it was that I just never faced. And when I didn't face my fears, I was running from them a lot and running into drugs or running to parties and just trying to dull it out. And that wasn't the answer. And I think for me, just by sharing my story a little bit, if I could reach anybody, just to have to see some kind of similarity, not to end up necessarily where I was at, but if you saw them heading down that road and to change it, I always like to use the dominoes analogy, like their life is a series of dominoes, and they had a chance right then to pull that domino and stop the course of their life and change directions. And that was the evening reporting center, and that was at-risk youth. We had two other types of speaking engagements we did primarily, and one of them was the CAPS program in Blue Valley North, and that was the Center for Advanced Professional Studies. So the audience is a lot different. It might have been future lawyers or social workers or people going into the profession, and it was a different kind of experience. They would ask us a lot of questions about, like, routine prison life and things like that, but it was still equally important because there are people going into maybe similar fields as you guys, and I think we presented a little bit of humanity as opposed to just a crime, to maybe as they went into those fields, they could, bring that compassion to the change in prison reform. And then there was speaking at schools like Coach Dre's. And now these kids weren't in trouble. They were just there of their own voluntary, there voluntarily. But really, they were the same kids that were in the ERC programs and the same kids that were maybe around those kids that weren't in trouble yet, that were heading down that path. And or not going down any wrong path, but just having, like, some issues inside that they felt like they couldn't talk about. And just to know that it's okay to have those things, maybe reach out to Coach Dre or somebody that know that there's people out there that do care is a big part of it, and not knowing that they have to go through that alone. And I think by proxy, like, what I got from this was really unexpected, was I found a sense of purpose and, just some self-worth, like I think I had lacking in my life. And just knowing that I was a part of something maybe bigger than myself, I think that left a big impact on me. And, it continues to this day, and I'm really thankful for those opportunities. And it opened so many doors, being a part of Reaching Out From Within, meeting Sue Ellen and Russ, and just all the positive volunteers and people that made me feel like I did belong to something. And I had I'd never felt like I belonged anywhere, and I do now. So I'm really thankful for that. And I think that's pretty much my experience.
Thank you, Greg. And Greg was a leader of the Reaching Out From Within group inside the prison. He was elected by his peers as the chairman of the group, as was another one of our speakers who will speak a little later. But first, we're going to talk about the juvenile justice system some. And Johnson County, Kansas has a great system and a great leader. And we're going to talk about children who, somehow the school has not worked for them, and they wind up in that system. Callie Fishburne is the Director of Juvenile Court Services for the 10th Judicial District in Johnson County. and she actively supervised the evening reporting center that Greg was talking about, which was a grant-funded program to intervene with justice-involved youth. So Callie, if you would talk a little bit about that program, but more about the programs that are going on right now.
Absolutely, thank you, Russ. I'll try to make this short and sweet, but for those of you that do know me, I'm not short and, not gonna happen. So, why I got into criminal justice system was, was it Danny? I think he kind of mentioned this maybe. Affecting one life is one life saved. Yes, it was you, Danny. And that is what I knew was my purpose in life. And I feel like being in juvenile justice has allowed that to happen. I still have a youth from back in my days when I worked in Emporia. I still write FAFSA letters for him to help him with his, school debts, and hopefully when he graduates, he will do great things and, pay it forward like we all hope. So currently here in Johnson County, we are very fortunate to have a lot of great programs and services to our youth on juvenile probation, from Department of Corrections, mental health services, substance abuse services, parenting programs that might address some of those things on the ACE. We also have really great educational programs, not only just with Dre, that we just made this connection, a couple weeks ago maybe. We also have great programs that address those IEPs, the diagnoses that can lead to disruption in schools. So whatever our staff and other great staff from Department of Corrections we can all do to help, we're here to help, because we all are in this profession to make changes. We don't want to see our juveniles back in. We want to see them come in once and leave. I always tell my kids, hey, it's great to meet you. I'm like, but I hope I never meet you again. And I tell them, I say this with all niceness. I'm like, if I see you in Target, please say hello. Like, don't run away. But, I don't want to see you back in my office, because if I see you back in my office, that means we failed something. And if we fail, that means, what can I do next to help the next person so this doesn't happen again? So like Greg kind of mentioned, the Evening Reporting Center. In 2015, the Evening Reporting Center started as a safe place after school for our at-risk youth on juvenile diversion and juvenile probation to come and get programming. One of the programs was Reaching Out from Within. And in 2019, we unfortunately had to discontinue the Evening Reporting Center due to low referrals. But the benefits of Reaching Out from Within was received, because at the end of every Reaching Out from Within session, we always had the youth write comments and provide feedback. And I don't remember things well, so I wrote them all down. So here's just some of the comments that some of the youth provided. This is from 2015 to 2019. Some of the youth stated being able to talk to someone who understood how I feel sometimes and learn important things from them. One of my personal favorites was being able to talk without being judged. Another was learning other people have problems just like me. And I think that's one thing that a lot of us can recognize. We see people out in the community, but we don't know their story. And I think that was one thing that Reaching Out from Within allowed our juveniles on probation to do, is to share the story with someone who was able to relate to them. I know last night at dinner we were kind of talking about, and I think, where's she, Miss Lori? I think you kind of hinted at this also. Being on that side of the table. I've not been on that side of the table. But these gentlemen have, and they've been able to relate to our youth in a different way that I was not able to and won't, or like Coach Dre said, we're all one decision away from our lives changing. And I hope the juveniles that went through the Reaching Out from Within program understood that and are able to, not come back to the juvenile justice system, or, again, pay it forward to those that need the help also.
Well, thank you. All right. And we're going to now turn to our last panel member, Mark Showalter, who was also an alum of Reaching Out from Within. He was also the chairperson of the Reaching Out from Within group at Lansing Minimum when he was incarcerated, and has been out. Mark, you've been out for like 3 years now, and you're off parole. So he is a successful member of our society, and
take that with a grain of salt.
yeah, well, and Mark, even after he got out of prison, kept going to the Evening Reporting Center while he was on parole status, because he was so committed to helping those kids. And it was just a wonderful thing to see his interaction with them. So Mark, if you could talk about your experience and what you gleaned from it.
Okay, so before I get to my experience, let me tell you a little bit about myself, because I think that'll help with the experience itself. So I've been to prison twice. I'm 43 years old now, and the first time I went to prison, I was 20. I was definitely a mess at that time, trust me. And so going to prison was something that I worked very hard at achieving, even though I didn't realize it. And I think that's the important part that I want people to understand is like I was on a path to prison, not realizing it. You know, should have, but that's not really how it works sometimes. So I went to prison, won my appeal, got back out, had the memory fresh. I went to a correctional boot camp in Labette at the time, got out. First time I'd ever lived outside of home, moved right in with my girlfriend. Wasn't really, it was great initially because I had the memory of being locked up fresh in my mind, so I was motivated to do what I need to do, to follow the rules and whatnot. And as time passes, you know, you get bored. I'm 20, 21 years old. I'm bored. I want to go out. I don't want to be stuck at home with an 11 o'clock curfew. You know, so I kind of slowly slipped back into the things that I was doing before. Drinking was never really my thing, but I started drinking because I couldn't get high. And then going down that path for a while, it just leads with getting high, you know. And so I was starting to repeat the cycle that I'd been in before, and then I got into a fight at a bar one night. And that kind of started, there was a lot more to, you know, other events after that, but it led me to a 24-year prison sentence. I was 23 years old at the time when I got to Lansing, and that was longer than I'd been alive. And that's very hard to conceptualize. So, okay, I got 24 years, I'm 23 years old. What does that mean? You know, but you will figure it out. And so I went along in my prison experience, and for the first year or so, I did everything that I was supposed to do. I followed the rules, both the staff rules, the inmate rules, and I kept my head down, filed my appeals, worked on just legal stuff nonstop. So it looked like I was doing what I was supposed to be doing. You know, there's a point in prison where you can get comfortable in prison, and I think that's everybody's goal, whether they're in prison or in life. Hey, let's create a place of comfort. And I think even though I was in that situation, I felt like I got to that place. So I eased up on myself. And when I did that, I kind of slowly started drifting back into getting high, drinking hooch, which is terrible, by the way. Trust me. And so I went for a number of years where I was doing, on paper or on appearance, it seemed like I was doing what I was supposed to be doing. And that's been the problem my whole life, is it always looks outwardly like I got it all together, while inwardly or behind closed doors, everything's crazy. So naturally, everything came crashing down. And here I am sitting in the hole, and I'm like, okay, well, I done messed up everything I had going on for me in prison, and get out into the max facility again, kind of run myself through the mud, end up in the hole, and you know, so I kind of going through this revolving process. And it's interesting because all my friends were going through the same process at the same time for various different reasons. And that ended up being a very good thing for all of us because it made me realize that I was wasting my life. And I had already at that time wasted most of my 20s in prison. I was going to waste, you know, or spend all my 30s in prison. I got out when I was 39, and sitting in the hole, and I realized that, hey, I'm not doing anything with my life. I'm just doing what everybody else is doing and counting the days to get out of prison. Not doing anything to make that happen or to help that happen or to improve myself. So I started out on this journey to figure out what I learned, or to learn how to live. That's the way I said it. I'm gonna go learn how to live because I sure am not doing it now. And that eventually led me to reaching out from within. And so what I'd done is I had kind of set some goals for myself, okay, financial goals, just personal goals. And I was using that to kind of indicate where I was at in my journey and my progress. And so when I started going to the evening reporting center, I was kind of seeing the same thing that I experienced in my life, and the same thing that I was seeing in the group setting is that these kids, most of them, if they had goals, they weren't their goals. You know, they were the goals that, hey, you need to go to college, you need to get a good job. You know, and those are very legitimate things, but they weren't their own personal goals. And so they had a motto: change your thinking, change your world. And I always tried to communicate this to them because I felt this to be very true in my life, that we're all going somewhere. Every one of us, we're going somewhere. And so we either get to choose where we're going, or we're going to end up where we don't want to go, usually. And that was my experience with prison is, hey, these people ended up here because they didn't have the proper goals to put them in the direction where they should have been going. And I wanted to kind of ask a question on the treatment panel earlier, because they started talking about dopamine, and the mechanism of goal setting is very important. You know, people tell you, hey, just set some goals. Well, that doesn't really work, I don't think. You know, and it does. Well, it does in certain circumstances, but I think it's important for them to understand the mechanism of setting a goal. Hey, what does setting a goal do for you? Can you chart your progress? Can you, hey, at your halfway point, how do you feel about these goals? You know, are you moving towards them, or are you not? And if you're not, is that fueling you? Is it creating the friction necessary to move you in the direction? And so change your thinking, change your world. If you don't like where you're going, let's change it. And so I was constantly on them about the goal setting because, hey, you need to get something out of your goals. You need to get the dopamine effect out of your goals, you know, and if not, it's dry, and it's like, why would I set goals? I don't really get any fulfillment out of it. But, you know, each person is their own person, and they have to kind of understand that, and they have to have people to lead them through that. So when I was a kid, like I said, outwardly had it all together, inwardly just a mess. But nobody in my family at the time had been to college. I was always at the top of my class. I am a high school dropout, but my parents my parents were separated, but I was living with my mother at the time, and it was just assumed that I was going to go to college. And because I had a full-time job since I was a freshman in high school, I was at the top of my class. You know, hey, kid's going great. Brother, mess. Let's focus our energy over here. You know, and so just the whole motion. Nobody kind of guided me, you know, and that's not anybody else's fault. I have my own responsibility in that. But as a young person, somebody has to teach us how to do that. Somebody has to guide us through things. Somebody has to, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing for yourself, especially? And that's what I was trying to kind of instill in the kids at the Evening Reporting Center and the group itself. Hey, let's do something with our lives. Let's move in a positive direction. And so we had actually, it was after my release, but we had started before my release to revise the Blue Book, or to add to the Blue Book. So we added a goals section. And while most of the book is focusing on substance abuse, violence, stuff like that, it's like we can't just have that. You know, we have to have the counterpart to it to help us grow as individuals. And so I'm not going to say that I'm not the goals guy. Hey, set goals, but I understand the power of it. And I've just recently have found myself to where I had to remember, what are my goals? You know, so okay, my goals started long before I got out of prison. Or long before I got out of prison, and especially financially. So I was one of those guys that I got out of prison. I had money because I had worked hard for a long time in prison and saved my money. But guess what? I had a HUD debt. So I had a HUD debt from 1997. 1997, I was 17 years old. So here I am trying to resolve this HUD debt, which is a lot of money after that long time, trust me. You know, while at the same time, not, well, rebuilding my credit, but really building my credit. So I had to put building my credit on hold for almost a year just to try to resolve this debt, because I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna have to file bankruptcy or what, but I have to resolve this somehow, and then I have to get on to my goals. My goal is, hey, I need to buy a house, you know, and I did that. So I got it all resolved. It took a lot of effort, it took a lot of money, it took a lot of patience, and I had to figure it out on my own, you know, and so somebody that is just not equipped to handle those situations is like, okay, here I go, you know, and so since then, I've bought my house, I've owned it, I loan it, I'll say I loan it, the bank owns it. So that was almost 3 years ago, and, you know, I'm at a point now to where I'm like, okay, I have made these steps along the way. What is my next step? Where am I going? And the reason why I had to ask myself that is because I felt like I wasn't going anywhere. I kind of lost track, and I'm like, okay, not lost track of growth, but lost track of my progress. So where's my markers at? You know, what's my goal? What's my end goal? And that's what I think the power of it is. So it reminds me. And if I didn't have that goal there, I would just be floating along, going in a direction where I don't really know. And that's the state of most of our youth, you know, at least the ones that are already in the criminal justice system. They don't know where they're going. They're just trying to get out of trouble, or maybe not. You know, they're just kind of floating along, and things aren't real for them yet. And so I felt like it was important for us to help make them real for them. So, thank you.
I was able to sit in on most of those evening reporting center meetings that Mark was at, talking with the kids about goals, and it was interesting. These adolescents were, you know, they were bored. That's the lack of goals, I guess. And so what they did to deal with their boredom was party and use drugs. And so you could just tell in the conversation with Mark that they were changing some of that attitude and seeing the importance of their future. And so these two men have really impacted a lot of kids through their presentations. We are still a few minutes from having to terminate, so we do have the opportunity for some questions now. And does anyone, oh, Sue Ellen. So Sue Ellen's question was, what were for Greg and Mark, what were some of the more challenging questions that they had to deal with the kids that they were speaking to?
You know, they don't ask a lot of questions, Sue Ellen. So sometimes they make statements, but most of the time they just sit there and listen. You know, but I think, so a lot of the issues, or a lot of their issues, were revolved around boredom. And so when the kids are put on house arrest, or not even if they're on house arrest, sometimes when they just have a curfew, they don't really know how to handle that well because they're used to being occupied all the time. They're used to just going and hanging out with their friends. And so I know a lot of times it was brought up about how to be okay being bored, or, you know, not necessarily bored, but doing nothing. And I think that's a real challenge for most of them these days. It's a real challenge for me because I lost my phone recently, and yeah, I need that thing, you know. So I think that's a big thing for them. It's just how to deal with that, you know.
I think for me, the hardest question I was ever asked, I don't know if I was asked as a question, but for me to provide some kind of insight or help was for some of these kids that are in homes that are maybe immersed in illegal activities, or they're already in such a place to where I can necessarily relate, and where to direct them. And that's where I had to rely on these guys, and maybe they didn't have the answers either, but they knew the people that did, and it's maybe some of the people in this room that has the ability or the facilities or just the knowledge to direct them, because it's like almost a hopeless situation. and that's how they feel every day. I think that was a hard question for me to deal with. Like, how do you help someone where you almost feel hopeless and you're not even there, and they're in the midst of it, and they're already in trouble, or they're already suffering through it? How do you remove yourself from your home where that is the problem? And then should be their source of security and help. And I think that was probably the hardest question I ever had.
And Coach Dre, you get these questions all the time. So what's the hardest question you get?
I think you're right. I think sometimes just that, like, how do you, help a student that they don't have control of their parents or their home life, So just like all of us, knowing how to equip people and point them in the right direction, it takes a village, even in the supervision field as well. So just, trying to wrap that support around the individual or that student, because I definitely don't have the right answers all the time. So yeah, just relying on other people, just like we all do.
And also you. Oh, thank you. Question for Vicki and also you, Russ. My name is Jerome Wilhort. You both kind of spoke a little bit about how almost like violence begets violence. And I'm wondering, with America being such a conservative, almost Christian-based country, how do we root out and teach people that corporal punishment is something that will continue to breed more violence? You both kind of pointed out that it's something that almost kind of just continues that pipeline. So how do we teach adults that received corporal punishment and think that it's okay to maybe stop that trend?
Education. But, I was, for a number of years, I was the director of public school safety for the state of Missouri. And so I dealt with all 524 school districts. There were a large number of districts where corporal punishment was still under board policy approved. And so, we are changing, but we are slowly changing. And education, I think, is the way we do that. But I'll let Vicki respond.
No, I agree with you. I think education is the way to do that. The Centers for Disease Control, of which I'm doing a project, and I'm kind of boots on the ground with public engagement and education, has identified corporal punishment as one of their areas they really want targeted. And so we're getting a lot of training around that. The American Academy of Pediatrics has come out opposed to corporal punishment, wanting more positive parenting strategies. So there's starting to be a movement that's building, but it's slow. We had a situation in Kansas where a state legislator was wanting to say corporal punishment was fine up to 10 times as long as you didn't leave a bruise the size of a nickel, and the country went ballistic, right? And so it all, came back to me. And people that are tracking all of that determined that, just as Russ was saying, that we'd only had one incident of corporal punishment through the schools in the previous 10 years. So I think Prevent Child Abuse America, of which Sue Ellen's on their board and I am the chapter director here in Kansas, they're moving forward, starting with the schools, trying to get this off the books in the schools, and then moving forward from there as a social norm change, as a cultural norm change. But it will be no small thing.
Hi there. Thank you for your work in schools. I am a retired teacher of 33 years in elementary school. And also, after that, was a student teacher supervisor. So I got to help them, coach them in their classrooms. And I'm telling you, we need about 1,000 Dre's. I'm serious. What we need is funding to hire people like him, because they're going to make the difference, because they actually work with kids. And they actually have hands-on, and these kids trust them, and they will tell them things. They wouldn't tell me because I'm their teacher. Sometimes they did. But I don't know how we do this and get the word out, but we need to elect people who will fund public schools. And there's no better example than what Dre's doing. The funding for that, I mean, one person in a school district of 28,000 people, that's ridiculous. I mean, it's a start. But we're not electing people that care enough about our kids. So just think about how you're voting. I'm sorry, I know you don't want this to be political, but it is political. And you won't have funding for your organizations either. So, because you offer, come off of grants and things like that. So what do you guys think we could do to get people to vote differently or just to get the word out about programs like these that are really helping kids a lot?
Put a sign up.
Well, reaching out from within is really working at getting word out, and we're doing a better job of that with our social media capabilities that Richard's helping us with back there. But there's a lot of work to be done, and all of us have a role in that. We all have to spread the word about these kinds of programs and the importance of them to our society. We can't stay the country with a mass incarceration problem. We've got to fix it. And so the only way to do that is through our youth. And we've got to work in our schools and make a change there.
You can take it. I would just like to say that shockingly, it's Prevention's Day. Prevention is having a day everywhere in most fields. In the field that I'm working in early childhood education and in child abuse prevention, the dollars aren't going to the intervention anymore as much as they're going to prevention. It's got bipartisan support. When I meet with members of the Kansas congressional delegation, state legislators, and we're doing education, nobody wants to see this. Nobody wants to see people go to prison. Nobody wants to see child abuse prevention. Nobody wants to see this happen, and they're willing to invest in prevention. So we're in a day where this is being received, and we need to seize the day.
Richard?
Hi. We got a really great question in the chat from Angie. Angie has a question for Dre. Do the other Kansas City area metro school districts, do they also have coaches like you that they hire? It also kind of goes along with that nice lady's question over there.
So I'm going to be honest, I don't believe so. I think a lot of times schools rely on the mental health professionals in their building, so social workers, counselors, to kind of address some of those social emotional needs. So honestly, I think Shawnee Mission School District is the only district that has a position such as mine in the greater metro area.
So we got another question. Okay.
Yeah, I'm Peter Neidmeyer. I'm a formerly incarcerated person. I have a behavioral health and substance use disorder practice in Wichita, and I work with a lot of young people and actually helped to start a prison youth counseling program in Colorado called Jericho Road when I was there. But anyhow, today what I'm working with a lot of these kids, and this ties right into education and prevention, and in 2018 I presented the USD 259 school board, and it really never got any traction. The possibility of initiating and implementing a science, evidence-based drug education curriculum. It's the same thing I do with all my patients. I have it with these young people that are 15 to 17, 18 years old. They come in and I teach them how marijuana, whatever it might be, disrupts critical brain structures that control judgment, decision-making, and behavior, and we have an unbelievable dialogue, and I have made more progress on that than anything else that I've done working with kids. And the work that you guys are doing aside from that, but in combination with that, it is amazing. And I've heard that there's been some great efficacy research in metro areas with using these curriculums that are put out by SAMHSA and NIDA, and they're unbelievable. It's all about educating people like you're saying, and we talk about middle schools, okay? If kids understand how this might take them down this path, we have to give these kids credit for being a lot smarter. Everybody that I work with has to come to their own answers, including kids. And they're a lot more likely to do that than they do if I preach and lecture to them, which I try to stay away from. But I do have a experience and background like some of the gentlemen here that I honor them sharing, and Dre, your work as well. So thank you. I'd just be interested if they have any of that going on in the Kansas City metro area and what your thoughts are on that.
Not that I know of, but keep doing what you're doing. Kids need all the help they can get, no matter where it's come from.
So I think we've reached kind of the end of our period of time, but we did our speaking engagement last in November. We had a speaking engagement with members of the Reaching Out from Within minimum group at Lansing, and they've had to take a break because of the Omicron variant, and so we haven't been able to start up again until next week. Next week we're going to have our next speaking engagement. So hopefully now things are going to get back to full flow. So we appreciate the panel's presentations. We appreciate your attention. And I think, Greg, you're up.
Thank you, Vicki, Coach Dre, Greg, Callie, and Mark. Russ, thank you. Just a couple of announcements before lunch. Thanks for hanging in with us. We are going to have the buffet. Will be set up on my right-hand side over here in just a few minutes. So we will get that ready. When you come back from lunch, what I'd like for you to do is to invite you to sit with somebody that you're not currently sitting with, somebody that you probably don't know from this area. Just to enjoy a 20-minute lunch, 30-minute lunch with them. Ask some different questions, find out where they're from, find out what they're doing here, why they're here, and we'll talk about that on the other side. But I want to make a couple of recognitions first. How many people do we have from, let's start with Kansas. Kansas Department of Corrections in the room. Raise them high. Okay. How about the Missouri Department of Corrections? Okay. How about North Carolina Department of Public Safety? Or North Carolina at all. There we go. Bring the rest of our guests from North Carolina in. How about, is Nebraska here? Nebraska. There we are. Nebraska. Thank you. Department of Corrections there. Department of Correctional Services. And then we have North Dakota and Colorado also in the room, I believe. Any other DOCs represented? Johnson County, thank you. Okay. Get to know these folks. Have some conversations with them. We'd love to be able to intermingle. A lot of other organizations are also represented, so we invite you to commingle during lunch. And then we will come back and have some questions and answers before we start the fourth panel of the day at 1:30. So enjoy your lunch. Thank you.